Rain slammed against the windows of the massive glass tower of Barron Automotive Industries, while dozens of employees hurried through the lobby carrying tablets, blueprints, and coffee cups. At the center of the chaos stood CEO Victor Barron, a man famous for turning bankrupt companies into billion-dollar empires and destroying the careers of anyone who slowed him down. His expensive Italian shoes echoed across the polished floor as he walked toward the underground garage, with a group of engineers following behind him, like nervous shadows. Cameras from the company media team rolled beside them, because today was supposed to be historic. Barron was unveiling the company's newest electric prototype, a futuristic vehicle called the Vortex X9, designed to dominate the market and crush every competitor. But when the elevator doors opened into the garage, silence swallowed the room. The prototype sat in the center, beneath bright white lights. Dead. Its screens were black. Its engine system wouldn't start. The charging core had failed again. Senior engineers whispered anxiously, while technicians stared at laptops in disbelief. Victor Barron's jaw tightened. 3 years, he growled, and this thing still behaves like junk. Then his eyes landed on a rusty old sedan parked near the corner of the garage. Oil stains covered the hood. One headlight hung loose. Beside it stood Daniel Reyes, a quiet maintenance mechanic, wearing faded boots and a cheap rain jacket. Daniel quickly lowered his gaze as the executives walked past. Most employees barely noticed him. To them, he was just another single father, working double shifts to keep food on the table for his 10-year-old daughter Mia. But Victor Barron suddenly pointed at Daniel's old car and laughed. "That thing belongs in a graveyard." Several executives chuckled nervously. Barron smirked. "You hear me? That car is dead." Daniel looked at the cracked hood of the sedan. He had rebuilt every inch of it himself after buying it from a junkyard 5 years earlier. The car was ugly, but it never failed him. It carried him and Mia through snowstorms, hospital visits, and nights when they had nowhere else to go. Daniel calmly replied, "Sometimes people give up on things too early, sir." The garage became awkwardly quiet. Barron stared at him with amusement. "You're a janitor with a wrench. Don't philosophize to me." Then he turned toward the engineers again. "Fix my prototype by the investor summit next month, or every one of you is gone." The team scattered in panic. Daniel remained silent, but inside him something burned. He looked at the dead prototype under the lights and noticed something nobody else had noticed. A faint ticking sound coming from beneath the battery housing. Tiny, irregular, dangerous. Daniel's life had never been easy. Every morning before sunrise, he woke in a tiny apartment on the edge of the city, where peeling wallpaper curled from the damp walls. Mia usually sat at the kitchen table doing homework while eating cereal, because Daniel worked late almost every night. Despite everything, she always smiled when he came home. "Did the rich people break more cars today?" she joked one evening as Daniel heated canned soup on the stove. He laughed softly. "Only the expensive ones." Mia noticed the bruises on his hands from working overtime. "You should tell them you're smarter than those engineers." Daniel shook his head. "People like me don't get listened to." But Mia frowned. "That's stupid." Daniel smiled sadly because deep down he knew she was right. Years earlier he had studied mechanical engineering at a small college, but after his wife Elena died from illness, he dropped out to raise Mia alone. Bills crushed him, dreams disappeared. Survival became the only goal. Yet even after all those years, Daniel never stopped studying engines at night. His apartment shelves were stacked with old repair manuals and notebooks filled with designs nobody had ever seen. While other mechanics replaced parts, Daniel understood machines like living creatures. He could hear problems before scanners detected them. The next morning at work, panic filled Barron Automotive. Engineers argued beside the dead prototype while investors demanded updates. Daniel quietly mopped floors nearby and listened carefully. "Battery instability," one engineer whispered. "No." Another argued the cooling system is corrupting the software. Daniel glanced again toward the prototype and heard that faint ticking sound. Tick, tick, tick. His stomach tightened. During lunch break, he approached the lead engineer cautiously. "Sir, I think the issue might be mechanical resonance near the battery chamber." The engineer barely looked up. Maintenance staff shouldn't give engineering advice. Daniel tried again. "If pressure keeps building, enough." The engineer waved him away. Nearby executives snickered. One muttered, "Next the janitor will redesign the engine." Humiliation flushed across Daniel's face, but he walked away quietly. Hours later, while cleaning the garage alone, he noticed sparks suddenly flicker beneath the Vortex X9. His instincts screamed. He dropped his tools and ran toward the emergency shutdown panel. Security guards shouted at him, but Daniel ignored them. He slammed the emergency cutoff seconds before a violent burst exploded beneath the car. Flames shot upward. Engineers screamed and stumbled backward. Sprinklers activated instantly, drenching the garage in icy water. Smoke filled the air while alarms echoed everywhere. Victor Barron stormed into the chaos, furious beyond words. Who touched the shutdown system? Security pointed directly at Daniel. For one terrifying moment, Daniel thought he was about to be arrested. But then the lead engineer stared at the burnt battery chamber in horror. "My God," he whispered. "Another 30 seconds and the entire core would have detonated." Silence spread across the garage. Everyone slowly turned toward Daniel. Victor Barron hated being wrong, more than anything in the world, yet the evidence stood right in front of him. The explosion damage around the battery housing proved Daniel had prevented a catastrophic disaster that could have destroyed the entire facility. Investors upstairs were already demanding answers while emergency crews inspected the prototype. Barron approached Daniel with cold eyes. "How did you know?" Daniel hesitated. "I heard the pressure imbalance in the chamber." Several engineers exchanged skeptical looks. One scoffed. "That's impossible." Daniel calmly walked toward the damaged vehicle and pointed at a fractured connector near the cooling line. This piece vibrated at high frequency under power load. The sound repeated every 3 seconds. The engineers stared in disbelief because he was correct. Barron's pride visibly suffered. "Lucky guess," he muttered, but deep down he knew luck had nothing to do with it. Later that evening, Daniel prepared to leave work when Barron unexpectedly stopped him beside the garage elevator. "You rebuilt that junk car yourself?" Daniel nodded carefully. Barron smirked. 30 days, Daniel blinked. "What?" The CEO crossed his arms. "You seem to think dead machines can't live again. Fine, I'll make you a deal. In 30 days, restore the original Falcon GT prototype in storage." Daniel's eyes widened. Everyone in the company knew about the Falcon GT. It was Barron Automotive's greatest failure. A revolutionary performance car abandoned after repeated breakdowns years earlier. Executives called it cursed. "If you can make that wreck drive," Barron said mockingly, "I'll give you a permanent engineering position." Then his expression darkened. "But if you fail, you're fired." Nearby employees stared in shock. Daniel looked toward the storage wing where the forgotten prototype collected dust beneath a tarp. The challenge was impossible. But then he thought about Mia overdue notices, school fees, empty cupboards. This was the first real opportunity life had offered him in years. Slowly he nodded. "I'll do it." Barron smiled cruelly. "Good luck bringing the dead back to life." Over the next few days, Daniel entered the abandoned storage hangar after work. Dust floated through dim yellow light, while rats scattered across the concrete floor. Beneath a giant gray tarp sat the Falcon GT, rusted, stripped apart and covered in years of neglect. Most people saw garbage. Daniel saw potential. He ran his fingers along the damaged frame and whispered softly, "Let's see what they missed." What nobody knew was that the Falcon GT's failure had never been caused by weak engineering. Someone inside the company had hidden the truth years ago. And within the next 30 days, Daniel Reyes was about to uncover a secret powerful enough to destroy careers, expose corruption, and shock the entire automotive industry forever. The morning of the investor summit arrived with dark storm clouds hanging above the city like a warning. News vans lined the streets outside Barron Automotive headquarters, while wealthy investors, reporters, and rival executives poured into the massive convention hall, expecting to witness Victor Barron unveil the reborn Falcon GT. Giant screens flashed the company logo, while security guards moved nervously through the crowded building. But behind the scenes, panic had already begun. Daniel Reyes stood alone in the underground garage, staring at the Falcon GT with grease-covered hands and exhausted eyes. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours in 3 days. The restored vehicle gleamed beneath the lights like something reborn from ashes. The body was polished midnight black. The redesigned engine system purred with terrifying precision. Every wire, bolt and circuit had been rebuilt by Daniel himself. Yet something felt wrong. When he started the engine that morning, he heard a tiny vibration near the rear cooling system, almost too quiet to notice. Tick, tick, tick. The exact same sound he had heard weeks earlier inside the Vortex X9. before its battery nearly exploded. Daniel immediately opened the rear panel and discovered a hidden override chip connected to the cooling regulator. His blood ran cold. Someone had sabotaged the Falcon GT again. Footsteps echoed behind him. It was Olivia Chen, the young engineer who had secretly begun helping Daniel after realizing how brilliant he truly was. "You were right," she whispered nervously. "I checked the company archives last night. The original Falcon GT didn't fail because of bad engineering. The test data was altered." Daniel stared at her. "Who altered it?" Olivia swallowed hard. "Marcus Vale." Daniel's jaw tightened instantly. Marcus Vale was Baron Automotive's chief technology director, the same man leading the Vortex X9 project. Olivia continued quietly. "Years ago, the Falcon GT threatened to replace his own engine division. If your design succeeded, his entire department would become worthless." Daniel looked again at the sabotage chip hidden beneath the cooling system, and now he's trying to destroy it again. Upstairs, the summit countdown began. Thousands of guests filled the auditorium while Victor Baron prepared his speech under blinding stage lights. Meanwhile, Daniel realized the truth. If the Falcon GT malfunctioned during the live demonstration, it could explode in front of everyone. People could die. Security alarms suddenly out through the garage as Marcus Vale himself appeared beside several guards. His expensive suit was soaked from the rain outside, but his expression remained calm and dangerous. "Step away from the car," Marcus ordered. Daniel slowly stood. "You sabotaged both prototypes." Marcus smiled faintly. "No one listens to mechanics." Then his eyes darkened, especially dead-end single fathers. Before Daniel could react, the guards grabbed him and dragged him away from the garage while Marcus calmly closed the Falcon GT's rear compartment. Upstairs, the summit audience erupted in applause as Victor Baron stepped onto the stage completely unaware that the car about to be unveiled had become a ticking bomb. Locked inside a small security office, deep beneath the convention center, Daniel slammed his fists against the door in frustration, while alarms from the summit echoed faintly through the walls. Every second mattered now. If Marcus Vale activated the damaged cooling system during the live performance, the Falcon GT's battery core would overload under pressure. Daniel pictured thousands of people seated above the garage level, investors, workers, reporters, families. One explosion could turn the entire building into an inferno. Daniel forced himself to think clearly. Years of repairing broken machines had taught him something important. Every system has a weakness. He looked around the office carefully until his eyes landed on an old ventilation grate near the ceiling. Without hesitation, he climbed onto the desk, ripped the loose grate free, and crawled into the narrow shaft, despite the dust and rust cutting into his hands. Above him, the muffled sound of Victor Baron's speech thundered through the ventilation tunnels. Today, Baron announced proudly to the audience, "Baron Automotive proves that innovation never dies." Applause exploded. Meanwhile, Daniel crawled desperately through darkness toward the garage level. Sweat dripped down his face. Metal scraped his knees raw, but he kept moving because Mia's face remained fixed in his mind. He had promised her things would finally change after these 30 days. He refused to fail now. At the same moment upstairs, Marcus Vale stood near the stage controls, watching technicians prepare the Falcon GT for its public reveal. Olivia Chen quietly approached him, pretending to review data on her tablet. "Sir," she said carefully, "the cooling numbers still look unstable." Marcus leaned closer and whispered coldly, "After today, no one will remember the numbers." Olivia felt terror crawl down her spine. Suddenly, the stage floor opened dramatically and the Falcon GT rose upward beneath roaring lights and deafening applause. The crowd gasped in amazement. Cameras flashed everywhere. The restored car looked magnificent. Victor Baron smiled proudly as he approached the driver's side door for the live demonstration. Deep beneath the stage, Daniel finally burst from the ventilation shaft into the lower garage. He sprinted toward the elevator, but security alarms instantly triggered behind him. Guards shouted as Daniel raced through the corridors. Upstairs, Victor Baron started the engine. The Falcon GT roared to life with breathtaking power. Investors stood cheering. But Daniel heard it immediately through the ceiling above him. Tick, tick, tick. The cooling chamber was already destabilizing. Daniel reached the main stage entrance just as the Falcon GT accelerated across the platform for its first public test drive. Giant screens displayed live engine data, while the audience watched in awe. Then smoke suddenly hissed from beneath the rear frame. Daniel shouted at the top of his lungs, "Shut it down." The entire hall froze. Victor Barron looked toward the stage entrance in confusion as Daniel sprinted forward past security guards. Marcus Vale's face turned pale. Daniel pointed directly at the rear engine housing. The cooling system sabotaged. For one terrifying second nobody moved. Then sparks exploded beneath the Falcon GT. Chaos erupted instantly. The audience screamed as sparks burst across the stage, and thick smoke poured from beneath the Falcon GT. Security guards rushed toward the exits while investors ducked behind chairs in panic. Victor Barron stumbled backward in shock, as warning alarms flashed bright red across every giant screen in the convention hall. Marcus Vale quietly turned toward a side exit, trying to disappear into the chaos, but Olivia Chen stepped directly into his path. "You're not leaving," she said firmly. Meanwhile, Daniel ignored the smoke and sprinted toward the overheating vehicle. Engineers shouted for him to stop, but he already understood the system better than anyone else in the building. He slid beneath the rear frame, reached into the burning engine compartment with his bare hands, and ripped out the hidden override chip Marcus had installed. The metal scorched his skin instantly. Pain shot through his arm, but Daniel kept working. Tick, tick, faster now. He located the emergency coolant valve and slammed it open, seconds before the battery chamber reached critical pressure. A violent blast of steam exploded upward across the stage, knocking lights apart and sending reporters diving to the floor. Then suddenly everything stopped. Silence. The Falcon GT's engine slowly powered down. Smoke drifted through the air while thousands of stunned faces stared at Daniel Reyes, lying on the stage floor covered in grease, blood and burned metal dust. He had saved everyone again. Victor Barron stood frozen. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO looked completely speechless. Emergency teams rushed onto the stage, while security officers detained Marcus Vale. After Olivia handed them proof of the sabotage and altered records from years earlier, reporters immediately surrounded the scene as the truth spread through the convention hall like wildfire. The Falcon GT had never been a failed design. Daniel Reyes had uncovered years of corruption inside the company, but the moment that truly changed everything came. Minutes later, when Victor Barron slowly walked toward Daniel, in front of every camera in the building. The CEO looked down at the mechanic, whose old sedan he had mocked only 30 days earlier. Then Barron spoke quietly into the microphone still broadcasting live across the entire hall. "I said that car was dead." He paused, looking at Daniel with visible regret. "Turns out I was wrong about both the car and the man driving it." The crowd erupted into applause. Some employees even stood cheering. Daniel struggled to his feet while paramedics treated the burns on his hands. Tears filled Olivia's eyes. Reporters shouted questions from every direction, but Daniel only searched the crowd for one person. Near the front row stood Mia, clutching her backpack tightly, her eyes full of pride. Daniel smiled weakly at her while she ran across the stage and wrapped her arms around him. Cameras captured the moment instantly, the exhausted single father and his daughter standing beside the machine. Everyone had abandoned 30 days earlier. He had been invisible, a maintenance worker people laughed at, a man surviving paycheck to paycheck with a broken old sedan. But now the entire world knew his name, and as the flashing lights surrounded him, Victor Barron quietly stared at Daniel's rebuilt Falcon GT and finally understood something success had never taught him before. Sometimes the people society calls broken are the very ones capable of rebuilding everything.